What does it mean to be close? Is it confined to physical touch? Or is it a feeling? An idea, perhaps? What if this idea traveled with you everywhere you went, and the boundaries of distance merged like fingers intertwined? Do you remember what it's like to hold the hand of someone you love? What if those hands swept through like a river, carrying you along in its infinite connectivity? As it stands, our world is fragmented and disconnected, particularly due to technology and the physical isolation of the past few years. Loneliness, while it is a crisis of this generation, is not confined to this moment in time. We all feel lonely sometimes. Loneliness is considered a social pain, but I think that's half of the story. Loneliness isn't a wound that can be soothed by the seemingly straightforward advice, just get out more, be around more people. The loneliest I've ever been wasn't necessarily due to a lack of company. Instead, my isolation fed on the feeling that no one understood me. My inner world was very strange and unique, and I rarely let anyone outside of it enter. I wasn't sure that they knew how to, or that I even wanted to let them in. I think that loneliness is rooted in our fear of our peculiar state and nature. We come into this world alone and we leave it in the same condition. And of course, there are those who are inclined to reduce human beings to nothing more than their biological or their primal nature. I think that the very intimate human desire for love and connection puts a dent in that reduction and validates it in a way. We want to feel understood, and perhaps most importantly, we want to feel like our presence mattered to those around us. With the pressure of time looming over us, loneliness can seem suffocating. To return to the cruel hands of death alone would have meant that our time here was meaningless. I don't know if that's necessarily even true, but that is the way that loneliness makes us feel at times. Solitude is the profoundest fact of the human condition. Man is the only being who knows he is alone, and the only one who seeks out another. His nature, if that word can be used in reference to man, who has invented himself by saying no to nature, consists in his longing to realize himself in another. Man is nostalgia and a search for communion. While we may be driven toward our own ends, deep within us the desire for connection transcends the confines of the individual. It's impossible to receive the love and connection of another without reciprocating those feelings. Love is not selfish. If love is one-sided, then that isn't love. It may be attachment, dependence. Resolving loneliness begins by resolving the loneliness of others, and yet paradoxically, loneliness seems to antagonize the very people that we wish to connect with. In a materialist, hedonistic world, loneliness is construed as a material insufficiency rather than a spiritual one. We view the crisis of loneliness as a lack of objects. Companionship has become something like a game that involves finding the right objects as opposed to realizing a genuine love for humanity. When we are lonely, we are experiencing a lack of love for mankind. If the beginning and the end of existence are steeped in individuality, then the space between must embrace the dissolution of the individual. Life is a balancing act. Love is a balancing act. If we fail to fulfill this balance, we fall into the depths of despair. Loneliness cannot be cured by the selfish aim to be adored or cared for. Most people see the problem of love primarily as that of being loved, rather than that of loving, of one's capacity to love. Hence, the problem to them is how to be loved, how to be lovable. Many of the ways to make oneself lovable are the same as those used to make oneself successful, to win friends and influence people. We only lack the things that we believe that we can't have. The thing about desire is that it's rooted in scarcity. I'm sure that you had a moment in your life where there was an object that you absolutely wanted, and once you obtained the object of your desire, it was no longer special to you. If you had all of the wealth in the world, you wouldn't need to buy every single object of your desire. Simply being aware of your worth would suffice. And this is very similar to the way to our perception of love and loneliness. When we feel lonely, it's because we view love as a scarcity, and perhaps some part of us doesn't believe that we are worthy of it. Once the belief exists that love is available everywhere, then physical companionship is irrelevant. The dominant belief surrounding love is that it's only possible between specific people or for specific people. Society perpetuates the exclusivity of love by overemphasizing the significance of romantic love. But the misconception here is that love is not a feeling. Love is a state of being, like freedom. We don't feel love, we are loving. The allure of the idea of a soulmate or romantic partner is that one can delude themselves into believing that attraction and physical affection are love, when in actuality, that affection is a fleeting pleasure. The externalities of who receives our love is irrelevant because love is an internal phenomenon. And we don't need to seek out people to love because by virtue of being human, we are worthy of love. We are all worthy, even the worst of us. In fact, I think the worst of humanity is the product of a lack of love. There is no difference in the range of human bonding, whether it's platonic love or romantic love, love directed toward humanity, a parent, a partner, a friend. It's all the same love. If we possess a genuine love for others, then we experience a love for ourselves, and we can confide in this internal wellspring of connectivity. And under these circumstances, loneliness dissolves, it melts away into solitude. And solitude, unlike loneliness, is not a state of deprivation. It's a form of freedom from the conformity of the rigid bonds that we've decided to label as love. In the moments of my life when I felt deeply misunderstood, I was experiencing a lack of love, and more pointedly, a lack of compassion for the various stages, thought processes, and ideas that occupied the minds of others. And upon realizing this, I was reignited by the inspiration that others were offering in the form of existence, as a manifestation of existence. And although I was alone, I wasn't necessarily lonely, and I felt very comfortable being misunderstood. We enter solitude, in which we also lose loneliness. True solitude is found in the wild places, where one is without human obligation. One's inner voice becomes audible. One feels the attraction of one's most intimate sources. In consequence, one responds more clearly to other lives. The more coherent one becomes within oneself as a creature, the more fully one enters into the communion of all creatures. That's all I have to say. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons. If you'd like to continue this discussion we have going here on reality, existence, so on and so forth, please consider joining me on Patreon.